6E and 6 gigahertz, and eventually we're going to segue into Wi-Fi 7. But first, we have to start with a little bit of a history lesson. So I mentioned a little bit ago, this is the 25th birthday of Wi-Fi, 25th anniversary, call it whatever you will. So 25 years ago, 2.4 gigahertz was all we needed. It reigned supreme. It was a nice to have. You only had 3 non-overlapping channels. It's important for me to stress this. You'll hear people say, well, Wi-Fi 2.4 has 11 channels or 13, depending on the part of the world you're in. Yes, but you want non-overlapping channels in every spectrum because you're not interfering. So there's only 3 clean channels in 2.4. You had speeds from 11 megabits per second to up to 54 megabits per second, which honestly is not bad, although we're capable of doing much, much better than that now. And it was a nice to have. You did not need to have it. I mentioned before, people would call and they would just get one thrown in their office if they could get it, or, you know, I remember deploying the first one at my house when I was still living with my mom when I was in my 20s. And like, I didn't even give her the password. I don't think she had any devices that could use it. It was a nice to have. Nobody else needed it. Didn't matter. I didn't really have that much that used it. It was just a nice to have. But now it's a need to have. Right? And we get to Wi-Fi 5, or 5 gigahertz rather, and we get more channels. I talked about the 3 non-overlapping. We can get faster speeds. We have more channels, right? It's more of a need than a want. But because it became more of a need than a want, we made a mess with Wi-Fi. And so this is actually a screenshot from Adrian's tool. And a buddy of mine sent me this from one of his labs, and I actually sent him one that I did from a field test, and it was even worse. But this is an example of 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Actually, no, I'm sorry, this is only 5 gigahertz. I had to duck around my camera there for a minute. So this is only the 5 gigahertz spectrum. So you're looking at channels for the entire spread of the spectrum, and you can see it's just a mess, right? We have, and you can see there's DirecTV, there's Roku, there's, a whole bunch of, just different endpoints, testing, different ISPs. And what you see here is all these different lines is a mess of, you've got 20, 40, and 80 megahertz wide channels deployed in this space, and they're overlapping and they're interfering, and it's an ugly mess. And you've got a couple channels there in the middle. Nobody's on 120 and 124 and 128. It's kind of hanging out 144. Some of the channels get avoided for one reason or another, but it's a mess. 552 wireless networks from just this one scan. And this is why we need more. There's a joke with Wi-Fi professionals. Years ago, people said 2.4 is dead. And as we talked about before, 2.4 is not dead. It's not going anywhere. And if anything, actually, Wi-Fi 7 is going to make it become a little bit more relevant again. But we can never have enough spectrum. So we need more. Which means it's time for 6.
Yeah, interestingly, so like we're talking about the over-the-air spectrum and the data rates, between the client and the AP. But the core network that's connected to has expanded too. Going back 25 years ago, the network that was connected to that AP wasn't as robust or didn't have the bandwidth or the modulation profiles or anything, to support anything much more than 54 megabits per second. Like we thought we were doing great at like 23 with DOCSIS 1, when that first came out, regardless of what the AP could do. So, it's both the core backbone has improved along with, the bandwidth and throughput accessible on the backside of the AP. So now it's about getting the client and the AP data rates to, satisfy the capacity that's available on the network that it's connected to.
Yep. I mean, we're growing in leaps and bounds across the board. And I think, a lot of us can remember when we used to get on the internet at home with dial-up. We were used to hearing the modem screech, and that was, we could complain it was slow, but show of hands, how many people have downloaded music or files right before you went to bed, hoping you were going to wake up and it was going to be complete.
It's going to be done, yeah.
And not be interrupted and have to redo it. And now my kids can't appreciate that because it's grown where it's just, it's so It's ever present. It's just a part of the fabric of life at this point, which is kind of scary to say it a little bit, but
it is. But it's instant gratification, right? We're so used to being connected to this super wide information pipe and being able to access whatever we want, whether it's music or video or files or work or video. Like, people are just so connected to it. It's become part of the fabric of our life, as you mentioned, and the expectation is that it's going to continue to be there. And oh, by the way, there's technical use cases that haven't even been developed yet to fill this pipe that we're still building.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and that's one of the areas where Wi-Fi 6 gigahertz gets really, really crazy. Excuse me, I don't think I have a slide on that, but I can talk to it real quick. I mean, a lot of the early adopter kind of technologies that they pitched for 6 gigahertz were things like AR and VR, like the reality headsets and things like that, so that they could have like a battery pack in the headset, but they weren't like tethered to the computer because they would have enough processing power and the throughput, the bandwidth with a 6 gigahertz pipe on a small local link of, you're within whatever distance to the main device or whatever. And I'm not a VR guy and it shows, but they were thinking, 6 gigahertz would be perfectly fine for it. And it may be, because it does have a lot more capacity, but it's wide open. It's a brave new world, and it's a lot of stuff to get excited about. I've said it a couple times. Now I guess it's really time to show everybody. So to level set, so there's 6 gigahertz, and then you'll hear Wi-Fi 6E and Wi-Fi 7. So Wi-Fi 6E is basically known, call it 6E, it was Wi-Fi 6 extended. 6E gave us the 6 gigahertz spectrum. That's when it became available to Wi-Fi. But that's about all it gave us. That's not all it gave us. So I don't want anybody going and sitting there, John got it wrong. It gave us other stuff too. But mostly it was known for giving us a 6 gigahertz spectrum. And that's part of the reason why I think a lot of people skipped or waited until Wi-Fi 7, because Wi-Fi 7 gave us the 6 gigahertz spectrum with a whole lot of stuff to do it. So 6E gave us 1200 megahertz of spectrum, which is a lot, but adoption was slower. We talked about it. Part of it was, I think developers and vendors all saw that Wi-Fi 7 was right around the corner, and in part with the global pandemic where nobody was buying things because nobody was in the office, it was a slower adoption.
But they were consuming bandwidth, as the operators will attest.
They were definitely consuming. So 6 gigahertz, not 6E, but 6 gigahertz gives us 59 channels. It's more than double the 5 gigahertz spectrum. And think about it, 2.4 has 3 non-overlapping channels. Okay? We've come a long way.